On the night of May 31st, 2009, Air France Flight 447 sat ready on the runway at Rio de Janeiro's Galeão International Airport. The aircraft was a 4-year-old Airbus A330, a machine widely considered the pinnacle of aviation safety and technological reliability. After takeoff, the flight proceeded with routine efficiency. As the plane reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, the pilots engaged the autopilot, leaving the aircraft's highly advanced flight computers to manage the navigation and systems across the Atlantic. 3 hours into the journey, the A330 entered a region beyond the reach of Brazilian and Senegalese radar. In this desolate stretch of the ocean, the plane vanished. No distress signals were transmitted, and no emergency beacons were triggered. Investigators were left with an impossible void. A modern aircraft, equipped with multiple redundant communication systems and constant satellite tracking, had simply ceased to exist in a monitored sky, without leaving a single trace of its final moments. The search for Flight 447 spanned 2 years and thousands of square miles. In the absence of wreckage, theories ranged from terrorist attacks to catastrophic mid-air explosions, as experts struggled to explain how such a reliable machine could fail so completely. In April 2011, a robotic submarine finally located the main debris field nearly 4,000 meters below the surface. The aircraft was found largely concentrated in one area, with the engines and fuselage intact, indicating the plane had remained structurally whole until the moment it hit the water. With the recovery and decoding of the black boxes, a new reality emerged. The data showed that the mechanical systems had not failed in a traditional sense. Rather, the aircraft's automation had encountered a scenario it was not programmed to handle and subsequently disconnected. The evidence pointed to a frantic 4-minute window miles above the ocean floor. A cascading series of interface failures between the pilots and their instruments had turned a temporary technical glitch into a fatal descent. The physical trigger for the disaster occurred as the flight entered the Intertropical Convergence Zone. Surrounded by a violent storm cell, the aircraft was bombarded by a dense cloud of supercooled ice crystals. These crystals targeted the pitot tubes, small forward-facing sensors on the nose that measure air pressure to calculate airspeed. The ice accumulation was so rapid it completely obstructed these critical sensors. Deprived of pressure, cockpit speed readings plummeted instantaneously from 275 knots to 60 knots. This temporary hardware freeze effectively blindfolded the aircraft. The flight computers, no longer able to determine the plane's true speed, could no longer maintain a logical connection to the environment outside. Faced with conflicting speed data, the computer systems determined they could no longer safely manage the flight. Alarms filled the cockpit as the autopilot disconnected and the autothrust system shut down. Under normal law, the Airbus fly-by-wire system acts as a protective shield, programmed to automatically override dangerous pilot inputs. At 2:10 a.m., unable to verify airspeed, that protection shattered. The system downgraded to alternate law 2, removing the safety envelope completely. The most automated commercial jet in the world had suddenly returned manual control to the crew. The pilots were now required to fly the aircraft by hand at high altitude in the middle of a storm without reliable speed indications. Junior First Officer Pierre-Cedric Bonin, the least experienced pilot on board, reacted to the chaos with a fatal instinct. In a state of intense stress, he pulled his side stick back, commanding the aircraft to climb. Pitching up extremely, the aircraft lost lift and entered a deep stall. Critically, Airbus side sticks move independently. When the senior pilot pushed forward to recover, Bonin still pulled back. The computer averaged their opposing inputs to 0, neutralizing the command and sealing their plunge. The crew was trapped by a digital interface that masked their conflicting actions. They remained in a stall for over 3 minutes, falling toward the Atlantic at 10,000 feet per minute until the final moment of impact. Investigation into the tragedy revealed that the roots of the crash were established long before the flight left the ground. Air France and Airbus had been aware that the Thales pitot tubes were prone to icing, yet they had delayed a fleet-wide replacement, treating the faulty sensors as a routine maintenance matter. The training protocols also lagged behind the technology. Airlines had operated under the assumption that the aircraft's computers were infallible, meaning pilots were never trained in simulators to handle a high-altitude stall or an autopilot disconnect in severe weather. The families of the 228 victims were left to grapple with the fact that the disaster was the result of corporate negligence and a systemic failure to prepare for the rare moments when technology fails. Following a legal battle that lasted nearly 2 decades, the Paris Court of Appeal delivered a historic ruling in May 2026. Both Airbus and Air France were found guilty of corporate manslaughter, a landmark verdict in aviation law. The crash served as a final, brutal indictment of an industry that had begun to trust its software more than the people tasked with operating it. Today, the lessons of Flight 447 have led to fundamental reforms. All A330s are now equipped with ice-resistant sensors, and every commercial pilot must undergo mandatory training for high-altitude manual stall recovery. But the tragedy raises a broader question about our relationship with the automated systems we rely on every day. This is known as the paradox of automation. As machines become more capable, the human operator's role diminishes, causing their manual skills to degrade. When the machine eventually encounters a problem it cannot solve, the human is left unprepared to step in and save the system. Flight 447 remains a definitive proof that no matter how advanced the hardware or software, the final failsafe in any complex system is always a human mind that fully understands the machine it is controlling.